First, I want to thank all of you for making the time to join this interactive session. Darren and I are really excited. As you know, this is called Ask the Experts, Fundraising Events and Board Engagement Strategies, right? Two really timely and ever important topics, especially as we're in this moment of uncertainty with other challenges layering many of the nonprofit organizations that we are privileged to work with. So again, thank you to each of you for making the time and space. I want to let my co-presenter, Darren, introduce himself, and then I'll take us through some introductory remarks and get us going here. Darren.
Thank you, Christine, and great to have everyone on today. Appreciate you jumping on to listen to us. I'm Darren Port. I'm the CEO and founder of Powered by Professionals. We're a fundraising and event management firm based here in New York City, and we do work nationally, helping with major fundraising events. Everything's from run walks to galas to concerts to golf outings, any kind of major fundraising event, and we support in those three areas of fundraising, event management, and technology/back office support. It's a pleasure to meet everyone and look forward to sharing some of the interesting ideas and techniques that we use in our business.
Thanks so much, Darren. It's always a pleasure to work with Darren and his team. For those of you coming here thinking about your next events and how to really level up your strategy, you are in good hands with Darren. Let me kick this off with the host of our event. Darren and I are both very lucky to be associate members and part of the Nonprofit Resource Hub. If you're not familiar, the NRH, as we call it, is a trade association, and you can see our mission here is to serve, be a resource to, and educate the nonprofit community. We have almost 500 nonprofit partners now, as many of you know who are members. I hope you're benefiting from the resources and webinars and interactive sessions that we put out. We have, as I mentioned, 500 nonprofit partners, and it is completely free to join the NRH and just takes about 30 seconds or a minute. I'm sure my colleague Kellyanne Serini, who many of you also know, will add some information in the chat. If you have not yet joined the Nonprofit Resource Hub, I really hope you consider doing so. We have a variety of roles of folks from different nonprofit organizations, a variety of sizes, and we are growing. And so, as I mentioned, Darren and I are both associate members of NRH. Darren told you a little bit about his role at at Powered by Professionals. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Christine Deska, and I'm the president and co-founder of Nonprofit Sector Strategies and Bell's Board. And we spend the majority of our time working with nonprofit organizations on strategic planning, which tends to zero right in on board development. And we also created a board portal solution called Bell's Board. So whether we're supporting our organizations through our product or through consulting, we really have a unique view, as does Darren, into the challenges facing organizations in a broader way. And so we really want to impart a lot of our knowledge and expertise and hope you come away from this session with some tangible takeaways around both board development and engagement and how you can tie that into leveling up your events strategy going forward. So without further ado, let me jump in and also just preface this by saying, you know, we typically run our meetings in a webinar format, but this is an interactive session. So you will have the opportunity to ask a lot of questions at the end. I hope you've come with questions in mind. Darren and I are just going to set the scene with some basic information and foundational elements of each of our areas of expertise, and then really open it up for your burning questions. So please, you know, as you introduce yourself in the chat, if you came with a specific question or challenge you want us to address, we really hope to make the time to do that soon into the session. So that being said, as you can see on the screen here, I wanted to kick off with what board engagement is not. It should not be checking a box. It should not be an isolated task. And then hopefully to make you chuckle, it should not be a test of your patience. But we know that you're all wearing multiple hats, and many organizations struggle with even finding a point person to manage their boards and get the most out of board members and have the right board members in place and all of these things. But at the same time, if you view it in this way or are currently approaching it in an isolated sense, I hope one thing you can come away from this session thinking about is how to view it as more of an ongoing effort. So, what should board engagement actually be? Let me get to the next slide. As I mentioned, it should be an ongoing effort. It should be part of your strategic plan, and it should be a great opportunity once you really take some time to consider your strategy, where you are now, and where you want to go with your board of directors as it relates to your organization's overall goals. So I'm just going to go through 4 tips to hopefully plant some seeds around board engagement and board development. And then I'll turn it over to Darren to really dig into some event specific and strategy there. So tip number 1, and I can never say this enough, is really as you engage with your board, and this ties directly into fundraising, outlining those responsibilities and reinforcing them throughout the year. Right? Easier said than done, but having a clear roles and responsibilities document is really essential. And then you know that your board members are aware of what's expected of them and consistently messaging around this throughout the year. And if you do have the opportunity and are in the process of recruiting new members, which I'd be remiss if not to say this isn't a challenge for every organization we work with. Recruiting not only new members, but the right members for your organization and whatever your goals might be, right? It's not just skill sets, it's always ability to give comes into play. In the past 3 client meetings I've had over the past 5 days, it's an ongoing challenge to find the right folks. But I do believe when you put the right strategy in place, and I've seen it play out, that you can improve that composition and therefore improve the engagement, and then fundraising follows. Next key tip: to offer ongoing training and support. So now more than ever, board members may feel a little bit overwhelmed like the rest of us in this current environment and really be heartened to know what their responsibilities are. So not only is education important, but also other training. And by the way, this doesn't mean that you have to be the ones delivering this among your team. There are so many free sessions out there where you can point your board members to connect with, where you're not the ones taking on more of the roles that you already have, but you're also arming your members with more information about their roles and what's expected of them. That's broadly speaking. But now when we think about fundraising and some of the elements that Darren will get into, there's a lot of ways you can equip your board members with these skills. And so I gave one example here, and there's a lot of other free resources out there. This is a forward-facing part of our site where you can essentially click in, generated by AI, templates to do outreach, to cultivate relationships, depending on where that donor is in your life cycle, depending on the guidance of you, many of you development directors listening now, can really plug your board members into some of this messaging, make it your own, and make it a more turnkey process to really lean into your board members' relationships. Tip number 3, personal networks. How are we showing our board members how to tap into their networks? That's a question that I ask because often requests are made in a broad sense. Anyone know anyone? What do we, how can we have a better outcome for this event? But how are we making specific asks, or really not just guiding the horse to water, but having them drink the water? So I've seen this play out in real time when you ask board members specific questions, such as, who are the top 3 social circles you're involved with? Who are the top 3? Describe the top 3 networks of folks that you interact with. Do they all know about your board service? Do they know why the mission of our organization resonates with you? So there are a lot of exercises you can consider. And I'm happy to share in a follow-up our relationship building template worksheet that I typically customize during a board retreat setting or an annual check-in with a group of board members to really try to pry this information out. But funny enough, it doesn't feel like prying. Once you ask these questions, there's a lot of aha moments of, oh, I didn't even think of mentioning my board service when I'm at my local key club meeting, or when I'm at this completely different networking group meeting that I've been involved with for 20 years. And so these things tend to bubble up when you engage in conversations and exercises that lead your board members to consider um, their networks. All right, last and final tip before I turn it over to Darren. And I referenced this earlier, but I cannot emphasize enough how much consistent and clear communication matters. And I know Darren will get into this as well, but you can see from these charts, right? Your board members should have a sense of where you are as it relates to your goals and their role in that process. And that's why the strategic planning element, sort of hovering over all of this, is so important. When you're planning your events, it's because it's supporting the programs of your organization. It's supporting your goals in terms of impact. And so, however this could work for your organization to keep your members informed about your fundraising goals, about if you're celebrating a milestone, how are your board members maintaining engagement in these impact goals, and also accountability, right? We all need to feel some sense of purpose. And that feels good for folks to know that they've contributed. If I've served on a board for a year before and not been asked of nothing asked of me specifically, when I know I have something to offer. And so when you are asked and you can deliver in some way, you feel good. And creating that accountability and that kind of circle of reinforcement ultimately serves your organization very well. All right, so now I'll turn it over to Darren to really dig into some fundraising strategies and trends, and taking us into one of the key topics for today's session, which is event management.
Thank you, Christine. That was really helpful, and a good reminder of the things that we really need to be doing with our boards, and the steps you need to take with these volunteers. So what this first slide is going to talk about. This is an example of something that we sent to an organization we're working with last year. Organization is called Trailblazers, and they had done a small gala that they were really trying to grow, and they hired us to come in, and we gave them some fundraising consulting, and then assisted them with the planning of the event. So we talked through these things. So what's very important is to build out a contact list, right? You're going to develop a robust strategy for expanding and engaging your contact list, ensuring a broad and engaging audience for fundraising efforts. So we asked them to show us who they'd worked with in the past, what lists they were working off of, and then we were going to come up with a strategy on how to expand those lists. Some of this is very relevant to what Christine was just talking about peer-to-peer. There's peer-to-peer fundraising, expanding the list, working through you to fundraise within your networks, maximize reach and engagement through personal connections. What networks surround you, who they are, who they know. Telling your story will enable you to kind of get more engagement from those networks. You want to strengthen your networking efforts, focus on networking to build valuable relationships with potential donors, partners, and community leaders. Coming up with a strategy for those board members on how to how to identify new potential donors through the networks that they're in, and figuring out people that would also benefit from being involved. Another thing to think about is what companies align with your mission. Either they have their own goals to support causes like yours, or maybe their business, in this case, Trailblazers is providing programs at camps for kids that don't get to go to camp, if you will, inner city kids and so on, and finding that maybe there's organizations that deal with the outdoors, and big companies like Home Depot and others like that may want to partner with an organization that does things like this, and or REI or something like that. So identifying companies that are focused on your mission, either through their own or through organizations that they support. It's another way. So when we do all this, and I've shared some of this in the past, but what we're going to do is there are certain steps that we recommend when planning out an event. We're talking about 6 months, 6 months or more out from the actual event you want to produce. Is we love to do a kickoff event, and the idea of this kickoff cultivation event, it's not a fundraising event. This is is a cultivation event, and it's used strictly to, it's almost an excuse to get you in motion and get everyone involved, to identify a couple of people that they know, to join them to learn more about your organization. So your core supporters, your board members, and potential sponsors will be invited, but we want them each to bring people. And by them bringing people, we may have this initial core group of 30 to 50 people. And that's going to be, those are going to be your salespeople, if you will, your promoters of this bigger event. They're going to be your fundraisers. They're going to give you, those are the people you're going to now spend time with, working with, to figure out where the big opportunities are. You're going to make sure you share the vision of the organization, your mission, and you're going to start to kind of warm them up to the ask that you're going to be making. And then putting them in roles, which is going to be an important piece of this as well, and making sure they understand what the responsibilities are. And so, yeah, you want to make it a fun and really a very relaxed evening. It's a 2-hour event at the most. You have an expert there, a speaker. If it's a medical organization, you have a top doctor. If it's in a different area, just someone who's very respected in the field. So it's really kind of unique. You're invited to a little bit of a VIP reception, if you will. Form a dedicated event committee. So build a team of board members, staff, and passionate volunteers. So we're going to, not only we're going to figure out who we're honoring and who the co-chairs are, but we're going to build a committee of people that are willing to promote and market the event. We're going to assign clear roles. We're going to have people who are in charge of sponsorship. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to be on the committee because I can't do sponsorship. Okay, well, we're going to give you a different role. Maybe you'll, as I freeze, maybe you can help with our auction, or you can help with the guest recruitment. I always say there's a role for everyone on the committee, and making sure people feel comfortable in that role. And a lot of people don't realize what they have the ability to do. So that is important, you as leaders within your organizations, to try to ask as many questions as you can, but also do a little bit of homework online about these individuals. Look them up on LinkedIn, see what they do, see who they might be connected to. And by doing that, you may realize that the person who doesn't think they can raise sponsorship money actually is in a position which would enable them to do that. And you're just going to have to show them because they've never done it before. So this is an important piece. So set up one-on-ones with those individuals that you think have more opportunities. All right. Tip number 3, to stay with the tip theme. Start with your event date and work backwards. So what we like to do internally is we put together an event binder that basically has all the steps that are going to be necessary to produce this major event. From what are the deliverables that either my company promises an organization, so we make sure those are on the first page. Then we go into timelines, run of shows, sponsorship outreach, event budgets. Really, the list goes on, and it's all in one document that you can put online and in an Excel format. And then you can also schedule who's got the different responsibilities. Okay, this one is an internal one. This one is our outside vendor. Oh, this is one of our board members is responsible for this. So people know what their responsibilities are. Make sure people understand what the deadlines are, what when we have to have things finalized, so we can plan appropriately and stay on track. What happens is you start working on one thing and you forget that you had to get all the information from the sponsors in by this date, and then it's a complete panic. So we try to avoid that happening by having a very clear plan in place. The top expert tip, laying the foundation to a successful event. Okay, well, yeah, so this is something that some of you who have maybe heard me speak in the past, I'm really passionate about this. Something I've been using for 20 years is something we call an organizational chart. And what this does, it enables you to look at your event as if you're running a business. For a business to be successful, you have to have people in the right roles. So it means you have to do your homework in advance to know what their capabilities are and possibilities are. And then you have to then decide what role to put them in, and then explain to them what their responsibilities are within that role, just like you would do with your staff and your employees. Almost like a job description, if you will. So the same thing works in this case. And for each event that we work on as a company, we always start with an organizational chart. Who are we honoring? Who potentially could co-chair? Are there any other special awards we're going to give out? Or is there a committee, which there has to be? What is our board doing? Is there an MC and so on? So I'm going to just take you through these steps quickly. And again, if you've seen this before, it's a refresher. If you haven't, pay attention carefully because this is really good. Okay. So the first step is the top part. This is the honorees. So what's critical is in any event that you're working on, you want to make sure you have credibility there, right? That drives home your mission. Because we're, as Christine mentioned, and we talked about before, we're telling a story here. So people have to understand and have to believe in the credibility of your organization. So sometimes an outside expert in your field can really add value. And that may be obviously a medical person in the medical world, a physician of some sort. It might be a teacher if you're doing something in education, in social service, someone involved in the community or in the government who's instrumental in the success of your organization. The second box in the middle is your money box. Now that is a critical component because if you don't raise any money, then people are not going to be happy. So it could be a philanthropist, an executive, or an influential family that you want to identify. And we want to make it very clear to those individuals what their expectations are. We want to be strategic here. We want to think through who they know, who we could involve in other roles. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the last box is that wow factor. So you see here on the left, the first picture is a top doctor at I think at Sloan Kettering. If I'm correct, I think it's Dr. Mellinghoff from Sloan Kettering. He's the top neuro-oncologist in their department there. In the middle picture is a very successful business guy, gentleman from Long Island, and Bill Fischlinger, who is the chairman of the Diabetes Research Institute Foundation, is presenting him an award, and they do business together. And this is a very nice pic there. And then Wendy Williams here, connected to an organization that we were working with, and she was willing to share her voice and spread the word about the event, which gives some excitement to the event. You get someone like that, because then people are talking about that post-event, and you kind of get some length out of your event as well. And then, so what we're going to do here is that from those 3 honorees, and you don't have to use this exact structure. This is just, again, a template. Every one of our events looks different. So it depends. Oh, wow, we have access to 2 great fundraising people. Okay, great. Maybe we should honor those 2 fundraising people. Or we have 2 incredible, influential credibility people that we have to recognize because of X, Y, Z. Great. So we have 2 of those people and 1 money person. The wow factor isn't as critical. And then what we want to do is think, who can we get from those honorees who has a vested interest in supporting the cause and supporting that person being honored, and would potentially fundraise for them and spread the word through their network. And we want to be strategic, and we want to think through who has the best ability to actually raise the money. So, so sometimes that's a vendor or a business partner, as you see here in one of the boxes as a co-chair. For the doctor, sometimes it's a caregiver or a patient that they've been treating that has so much respect for them, or loves them for many, many good reasons. And they're willing to do anything for that doctor. So sometimes asking them to play a role like a co-chair, they're willing to do, as long as you explain what that means. Sometimes it's a board member in your organization that has the potential to do more. And you say, if we make them the co-chair of the event, that's going to give them that push that they need to expand what they can do. And then sometimes it's a friend or an honoree friend of the honoree, I should say. So these are different ways that people can be incorporated, and those people are responsible for reaching out to their networks, to their business contacts, and or also reaching out to the honorees' business contacts if the honoree would like them to do it on their behalf. So that's another amount. And then sometimes you'll have honorary chairs, and those individuals are in place. Those are people who are very involved already, and we want to keep them involved. So sometimes just giving them some sort of title with the event keeps them active. They usually give a little bit of money, and they're also having their name involved is going to get other key people involved. Okay. Moving here, and then this is the rest of it. So sometimes I said there's additional awards. So sometimes we'll recognize courage or other leaders or even amazing volunteers through your programs that you want to highlight. This is a great way to do that. We do want to be strategic because we don't want a program to go too long. So we may not have these people speak, but they may receive a quick award. But by having them get an award, gets them to share it with their networks, and so on. So that's another way to look at it. And then, sometimes as a nurse or a teacher, you want to highlight, and sometimes a former award recipient to present the awards is a great way to keep people involved. We want to keep people involved year to year. We had a meeting this morning. We were recapping an event from Saturday, and we were already talking about how do we get the 3 or 4 key people from this year's event to have a role next year, because we know if we can stay active with them throughout the year, that puts us in such a better position for success in 2026. So that is that. Someone just asked, do you use any project event planning software for timeline test tracker? We do work with Asana sometimes, which is used for that as well. But we use our event binder, which is a really sophisticated document that we created ourselves, that helps us kind of track everything. So that's usually what we do. And then there's this, you want to have an MC that kind of controls the room. It's critical to keep the attention of people. Someone who knows how to work through a script, who doesn't go on tangents, who doesn't start telling stories out of the blue. Someone who knows how to follow the script that you want them to follow, and can command respect. And obviously, if they have a big name, people want to listen to them as well. And then having that fun auctioneer at the event, it's become huge, these auctioneers. They are so critical to the success of some of these events. So that's something to think about. They do cost a good amount of money. So you have to decide, is your audience ready to really engage with them, because they can really drive revenue up. So the investment does make sense in a lot of cases. It's definitely worth a conversation.
Hey, Darren, while you have the org chart up, I want to
Yeah.
pose another question that came
Please.
in. Thank you, Pamela. She asks, which level on the org chart would provide the lead, gift, or sponsorship?
Yeah, so the top one, the main honoree, is usually where you're looking for that lead gift. It could also clearly come from a chair, or it could come from an honorary chair, someone who's been involved for a while, big donor that you're just going to give a title to, but you're not expecting other stuff from except a lead gift. But really, lead gifts can come from a lot of different places. But there's usually a major fundraising goal for the middle box on top. And that is clearly defined. And you should not accept the honoree till you make it clear to the honoree what you're asking of them. That can be very uncomfortable at times. So we're basically asking this person and we're telling them they have to fundraise. Yes, that is correct. So you have to be very clear with them, because if you don't, then when you then start to fundraise and realize they're not willing to do it, you're kind of stuck and you put yourself in a very tricky spot.
And Darren, this is a follow-up. I think this is probably something on the minds of many folks who are at smaller or medium-sized organizations. And Roberta, thank you for the question. Roberta asked, how is this possible with an extremely small nonprofit with a really small budget? So where would you say an organization is still grassroots? Where could they start with an org chart?
Yeah, well, I mean, I
Implement
think
this?
the first place to start is kind of what you were talking about, Christine, is that board. You have to build out your board. So you have to do the steps that Christine was talking about, because if you do not do that correctly, you're not putting yourself in position for a successful event. We've worked with organizations, and we won't work with organizations if they don't have some of these pieces in place, because you're just not setting yourself up for success. So I'd say it all starts with the board, and then and then being realistic on what is possible, and making that list of the top 25 people as an organization, and then sitting down with them, rating them quietly internally, saying, okay, these people are already on our board. These people are big donors. Who do we think we could approach who would step up in the different roles, and kind of mapping this out before you start talking to anyone to see, are we ready to do this and at what level? And that cultivation event, can be done before. It doesn't have to be tied to an event yet. You can just do that as a way to kind of further feel out the people involved with your organization.
And just to add to that, Roberta, and for others who are thinking, where do I start? I'll ask Kellyanne to share a resource in the follow-up. I recently wrote a really comprehensive piece called Building Your Governance Pipeline, and goes through the steps to really build that foundation. And so if you're sort of thinking, well, we don't have that yet, how do we start chipping away at this, and maybe from in a parallel effort, right? If you're under pressure to deliver on events while also maybe not having the board of your choice in place, which again, like I said, is a common and growing challenge for organizations actually right now. So I'll share that article, and also maybe even a recording link to a session that talks through more around the building of that governance pipeline specifically, because it really does. I mean, without an active, engaged board, it makes this sort of org chart, like Darren mentioned, less likely to succeed, because those core elements need to be in place or in motion or part of your strategy.
And this is not easy. So, like, doing events is not easy. Doing successful events is not easy. When you're small, it takes time. You're any size, it is a undertaking. So it's not easy for anyone. So let's just establish that. I think, having a strategy is critical, and continuing to find people to get involved in your organization is so important. And telling your story, having them tell their story, you tell your story to them to get them excited, and then have them tell their story to their contacts is critical for success.
Absolutely. So we have built in a lot of time for questions, as I mentioned, and hope you've come sort of with something in mind where we can just give you our quick tips and takeaways to start implementing now or for the longer term planning. So thank you for a question someone sent in to NRH. Darren, I think this is a good one for you. And the question is, do you recommend having a kickoff cultivation event for an annual event that's already established? So I think many organizations are seeing challenges in getting the attendance they had pre-COVID still. So much has changed. So if attendance is declining, but it's this annual event and they're trying to build excitement for that event, again, a beloved event for the organization, what would you say to that regarding that kickoff cultivation event idea?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it, so I think it is critical to do that. I think I'll give you an example. We just did one the other day. First, we got one of our board members for the organization we were working with was willing to host it at his firm, a big firm in a new gorgeous building in Manhattan. So that was exciting for people to even just be in that building. It just went up a couple of years ago. It was only 30 people, so it was very intimate, very low cost. It was very little money outlay by the organization, little to nothing. We had an expert speaker there. There were people there that were involved in other things that the organization has done over the course of the year. So a couple people had run the half marathon for the organization. Other people had been involved in another event that they had done, a smaller event. So these people didn't even know about the main event, which we were going to talk to them about. So they felt very important, and they felt special to be involved. We didn't have 100 people there. We had 30 people there, 30, 40 people. And the impact we made on a few of those families was critical, and they're interested in doing more now, which is really what it comes down to. And being able to have one-on-one conversations with them, I was able to identify that there were some fundraising opportunities with some of the people that have been involved with their half marathon program, which they weren't even thinking about. But once I started to talk and explain how it works, they then understood how they could get involved and make a bigger impact. So
Great question. I hope that gives folks some sort of ideas to maybe re-energize those annual events by maybe having a smaller gathering that is a light lift, but could really energize the event coming up. Another question that just came in, thank you, Nicole. Darren, what advice do you have for virtual benefits? Are you seeing those be successful for some organizations now versus all in person versus hybrid? But Nicole asked about virtual benefits specifically.
Yeah, I know virtual benefits have almost gone away. It's kind of crazy. We were living that world for about a year or two, but people seem to want to be back together. But you can do you can do that. I don't know the engagement right now. We have not done a virtual event in got to be about a year because no one has wanted that. Happy to talk to you about ways you can do that offline and just kind of strategize some techniques you could try to use, in making your virtual event happen. But short and sweet, I think, is the key to that's the advantage of the virtual event and probably the thing they're most interested in.
Thanks, Darren, and thanks, Nicole, for the question. Okay, another one coming in through NRH. How can we encourage board members to open up their networks if they are reluctant or say they don't know anyone with capacity to give? I'm going to take a stab at that
So why
first,
don't you
Darren.
take a stab at that one?
Well, what I would say is oftentimes, unless you ask the specific questions I was mentioning earlier about the networks that that board members interact with, and actually have folks write down those networks, those partner company connections, the affiliations that they have. Unless there's a space built in, I'm a big proponent of a board retreat being used to really generate some of those ideas. And that can also, to Darren's point earlier, be very low cost, be just a few hours in the morning to get it going, a breakfast retreat. You do a 9 to noon, but you get your board members in a setting where they feel more part of a team, they feel more of a purpose and connecting with one another. And when they're filling out a relationship building worksheet together, they feed off of each other's energy, and they feed off of the connections that they had they had not yet even considered mentioning your organization too, because think about how busy many of your board members are and how many hats they're wearing. And so never assume that someone within their even first level of connections has been um, told of the stories of impact that your organization is having. So I would say that reluctance tends to dissipate as members realize the conversations they haven't yet had, or they realize that it's not that they have to feel pressured to make an ask. It's more of opening up a conversation for an introduction and a connection. If a board member isn't the one comfortable making an ask, which most are not, but how can they deliver an introduction to you, the development director, to take it and run with it, rather than feel that pressure of knowing what a colleague's capacity is. Let the fundraising experts do that work if that's not where their comfort level falls. That's what I would say. And I don't know, Darren, if you want to add to that, because you're the one going to folks with a big event in mind. And what do you do when you face that reluctance?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. And people, oh, I thought I just lost it. People are, I'm sorry, I had a thought
Okay,
and
you're
I wrote it
human.
down.
Sometimes we have thoughts and sometimes they leave. My children do that to me on an hourly basis, if not more often.
Um, Yeah, no, I was going to give you an example. So one of the things that people definitely don't, you can't expect them to understand what we understand as fundraisers or nonprofit professionals. We think a certain way, and I know we think it's somewhat basic, some of the thoughts in our head, but that does not mean others think that way. So you really have to spell it out for them and just explain what the steps are, because people are overwhelmed by the concept and not always understanding. And yes, a lot of people are very uncomfortable asking, so you then have to come up with a different strategy for them. And if it is doing the ask for them, that's fine. I like to walk them through examples. Very big fan of using examples. I was talking to a board member who was very busy at work, and I've shared this one before, but I'll share it again. And he was in a big position. So I was on the phone. So I was on the phone with a woman the other day whose husband is battling a disease, and we were trying to figure out how to engage their network. And I said, well, let's try to think about who within your friend group and your family, where do they work? What do they do? What are their job levels? the example I was starting to say a minute ago, this gentleman had a big job at a big pharma company, very busy, was doing absolutely nothing for the charity. He was sitting on the board doing nothing. And all I had to do was ask him if he had vendors that he works with, which he said yes. I said, great. He said, just 10 or 11. I said, perfect. That's all I need. I'm going to send you an email and a letter, which you can personalize. And then I want you to send it back to me after you make your edits. And then you're going to send me those 11 names and their companies. And we're going to personalize this email and letter based off that. And we'll send you 11 emails back. So all you have to do is hit forward, get rid of our name, and then CC us and send those out. That's all I'm going to ask you to do. He's like, I can do that. That's simple enough. And that gentleman was able to raise $80,000 from 11 emails. And if not explained to him what to do, he would have raised $0. And the next year he raised $150,000. So in less than a year, this guy raised $250,000, $1 million for the nonprofit. And he was sitting there not being leveraged. So tell a story, use examples, give them ways that, and it might not be them. They might not be the person. It might be them just introducing you to a friend of theirs who works here or there. And then getting a call with that friend and then showing that friend how to help. Because people want to help, they just don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's such a great example too, because most business people have a vendor network. Us as individuals, we as individuals, excuse me, have a network of who's doing our taxes, who's the lawyers that we're working with in various capacities, what law firms are they affiliated with. There's a lot of tentacles that are often left unexplored. And I think Darren's example is great because it's that specific ask that he wrote for the member that was successful. So I hope that helps. And I would also add that to consider in a longer game, but many organizations engage best when a board member is inviting someone in their network in to simply tour a facility to see what's really happening on the ground in that organization. If you can get someone in the door by you as a board member sharing why the mission resonates with you, I often do the why then and now at board retreats. What brought you, what about this mission resonated with you when you joined? What resonates with you now? And seeing how that has evolved. And by you sharing your personal reasons why this impact is important to you, inspires others, and could inspire others to come and see it for themselves. If it's an issue area that is important to that particular person. And that's how the building begins. Let me see, Karen, thank you for this question here. Karen, you say, or I'm sorry, Katrina,
Yeah.
you say, we run into a scheduling issue with a local community that has a lot of annual events. What are some unique ideas that might be done in an off time? So not around a holiday or a special event.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this one. I don't know if I have a great answer for this, but there's all different types of things you can do. It depends on what your organization does, who the people are that are on your committee. But a simple get-togethers work. I'm trying to think of some good, one thing I would say I'll bring up is you can't over ask people. So like I tell organizations that do like 5 little events, it's like that's not necessarily the right strategy. Unless you understand what you're going to get out of that, because people have a lot going on, and then also people now work from home, so many people. So getting people out of the house is like another challenge. You used to get them when they were out already before they went home. To get them to leave their home after working from home is a little different than when they've actually been out of the house already. So, but any type of idea, and definitely doing it off times a year. Summer is obviously harder because people aren't around, but finding a unique venue or space where you can invite people to, leveraging people who are involved with your organization so you don't incur major costs. Venues are expensive, so you have to really be strategic with how you go about getting people together so that you're not burning through money.
Yeah.
And one other thing on the committee, the next question about engaging committee members and keeping them active, is accountability, is giving them roles. And I think Christine touched on this earlier. Give them a specific role on the committee. and then have them have a certain amount of meetings with a few people that they are now on their special committee. Because if you give people responsibilities, they usually step up. If you don't give them a clear direction and a role, then they don't know what to do, so they're not going to do anything.
Yeah. And I'd like to add to that too. I mean, Darren mentioned the roles of committee members. I mean, this is you know, across the board, right? We all need to know what our role is in our organization and have a clear definition of that. When that gets murky, then we don't end up meeting our expectations because it becomes unclear. And so not only keeping committee members engaged in their role, but also those milestones. We do have organizations that interact with one another within our portal with tasks that relate to a specific building of an event or a network or checking in on those milestones. So that's another great way because it's a built-in place where board members are already interacting with one another and leaders that we've seen be really successful in building that momentum and keeping the communication centralized and also the milestones communicated well. So that accountability piece is really key. And Darren hit on some really important reasons why, right? You need to know what your specific role is, even within the overall committee, to feel that you're an active participant. Otherwise, you feel like you're showing up, and what are you actually there for, right? You need to feel that and know that you're there for a reason. All right, I see. Oh, Alexandria, thank you for joining. Any fundraising ideas to replace a paddle raise at an event, especially if there are major donors who don't like that their guests feel pressured? Great question.
Yeah. You know, I'm a big fan of a paddle raise. I do know that a number of organizations struggle with certain people within the organization, big donors pressuring them not to do it or being uncomfortable with it. There's not a great answer for this in the fact that if you're going to get money from people in the room, you're going to have to ask them in some way, shape, or form, unless you quietly go about lining up people who are willing to match gifts anonymously, so that they're not kind of feeling like they're highlighted in the room in front of people. There's also the idea of, here's an idea, that if you had specific programs that you're looking to get funded, having a section of the event set up where there's information about it and people can learn more about the programs that can be funded at higher levels. And then if people are interested, can communicate directly with the organization without others knowing that they decided to do that. And then give at that level to support that specific initiative. It's almost like a silent appeal tied to specific levels. It's an idea.
Yeah,
I've
great.
never
Thanks for
done that,
asking.
but I kind of like that idea. Maybe I'll try that at an event coming up.
Isn't it a shame that it's the human nature that peer pressure works in these settings? And that's
I
why when you
do.
have that inspirational speaker or someone of influence at the podium where I've seen everyone feel compelled at my table, even those who I know aren't the big donors, but when you have that moment and everyone feels that they are a community supporting a given cause, and that special moment happens at an event, it is really something to see everyone just fill out the card or fill, and it's this very sort of it's a coming together around a cause moment. It's hard to achieve that, but when you go through Darren's org chart and you see all of the elements coming together, you can see when you get to that piece. Okay, we've got one more
Yeah,
question
this will
so
be the
far.
last question, I think. We'll take this one.
Yeah, Daniel asks, it's well known that fundraising events don't have a huge ROI. What is the future of events when these types of events are no longer profitable for organizations?
Yeah, well, this is a very good question, and thank you for asking it. I think what people need to weigh when looking at events is what they're really bringing to the table. So they're not just bringing that night, what's happening that evening. And I think it is important that you really look through your budget to see what is possible, and then understand what is a realistic return. I do agree that some organizations do not that they're not doing a percentage that is appropriate, but also to do an event, there is an expense. So you are going to take on an expense, but what you're also going to do, if done correctly, when done correctly, is you are going to open the door to a lot of future potential donors to your organization. And the next major donor might be brought to your event and learn about your organization that way. And they may not give for 2 or 3 years down the road, but they came to that event. That's where they were introduced to your organization. That's where they learned about your programs. That's where they got to meet some of your board members. And those are critical steps in getting to that big gift. So it has to be weighed appropriately, and you have to look at the whole picture, not just what one night was and what the cost was. You can't be irresponsible that evening, and you really should not be irresponsible that evening, but you have to also weigh in what the long-term effect is. So you have to make difficult decisions, and a lot of organizations we're working with are cutting some of the fun parts out. Not fun's the wrong word, but some of the decor or some of the things that you'd love to do, we're just going to cut there because we have to just stick. The biggest problem is the event spaces have become so expensive that has gotten out of control since COVID, and that is going to be the biggest challenge. But I hope I brought up a decent point there that you can go to smaller, less expensive events as another way. If you feel your big event, you're not able to do your big event at the right levels, the right percentages, then try smaller, intimate cultivation events. But you do need a strategy because it's very challenging if you don't have a strategy when you go into that. Sorry.
Daniel, thank you so much for that question. That's a really important topic. And I think, Darren, you did a fantastic job answering it, because I often talk to organizations we work with about the intangibles. And Darren hit on that, right? What you see in your guest list that evening is an opportunity, and you may not realize that opportunity for a significant time frame to come. And by assessing who you had in that room and what the potential is over time, is another great way to really drill down to that ROI. But it is tough when you isolate it to one event and you look at that bottom line and consider the best path forward for your organization, for sure. We're in the last final minutes, so I would just like to leave you all with one takeaway, just to bring this back to board development and board engagement, and a lot of what I kind of talk about day in and day out with organizations, and just to take a breath and view it as a process. And if you feel there's many items you haven't been able to address as it relates to growing your board or growing engagement among your existing folks, view it as a roadmap. And I'm happy to talk with folks. Our contact information is here if you're not sure where to start with that roadmap or what it should entail, but it really is an ongoing effort. So just don't feel like you have to try to tackle it all at once. And the same goes for strategic planning. I don't know, Darren, if you have any last words you want to leave folks with.
No, just if they need, if I actually, no, I don't have any last words, except that if you're interested in a 15-minute conversation, I'm always happy to jump on the phone with someone. I'm also going to put my LinkedIn link into the chat right now. Feel free to reach out to me through that. And we'll kind of take it from there. And
Yeah,
thank you for
thanks
joining
again.
us and listening. We really appreciate it.